Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire supported by Glenlivet Books. My guest is a first-time MP whose speeches have taken the country by storm. When she stands up in the Lok Sabha, the House sits down and listens to her riveted. Even the hecklers now lack the courage to interrupt. And then for weeks, the country does nothing but talk about her speeches. And yet, by the way, she's a first-time MP. So that raises the critical question, what is she like? Well, here's your chance to find out as I introduce you to Trinamool MP Mahua Moitra. Mahua Moitra, as I said, 3 of your speeches have taken the country by storm. They've literally gone ballistic on social media. And yet you've only been an MP for 16 months. I can't think of a single democracy where a first-time MP has had such incredible success. What's the secret? And are you surprised by it?
I'm very surprised by it, yes. I'm very surprised by it. And every time I stand up and say and speak in Parliament, I don't actually think that it will have the reaction that 2 or 3 of my speeches have had. So, I think I've been incredibly lucky in being able to vibe with what people are thinking but not being able to speak. So, say aloud. So I think the reason that they've gone viral or the reason they've been so well received is that there's probably a large number of people in this country mirroring my thoughts but lacking a platform. So when I'm speaking, they identify with it. And so I think by forwarding my speeches or getting their friends and family to listen to it, is they're like, look, this is what we are thinking and somebody's saying it.
So in a sense, you have become the voice for the thoughts they can't express themselves.
I think there's some of that going on. I can't explain it otherwise.
But you know, the interesting thing is the 3 major speeches have been a no-holds-barred attack on the government. In the first one in particular, you accused the government of fascism, of a lust to divide. Now, you were cheered to the rafters by your colleagues in the opposition. But what response did you get from the Treasury benches?
My very first speech, I was heckled a lot. And I think you mentioned to me and a few other people have said to me, Mahua, everything was okay with the speech, but you were screeching. And I completely understand I was screeching, but there was no way of getting my voice to rise above that din that was going on.
But you got yours back on the hecklers because you shamed them.
Yes, I did. To be fair, I did. And the second and third times, I think it was a lot better. But the reaction from the Treasury benches, funnily enough, when I'm speaking, is they're listening. The first one, the heckle, the second and third, they were quiet. But once it's over, inside the House, there's an atmosphere of, yes, we're adversaries. There's very much kind of opposition, Treasury benches. But once you leave the House and you're in Central Hall or you're in anywhere else within Parliament, there's a great feeling of bonhomie. So people come, my friends and even just other colleagues from the BJP have come over and said, "Acha bolti ho," well spoken. We may not agree with you, but very well spoken. And my kids have called me and said that Mama or Papa, is she your colleague? She speaks very well. So there's definitely appreciation, and that's a good feeling.
So outside the chamber,
yeah,
BJP MPs who you're attacking inside actually can come out and congratulate you on the brilliant job you've done.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And funnily enough, when there's somebody in the BJP who speaks well and we see them in Central Hall, we go to them and say that, yes, we don't agree with what you said, but your delivery was fabulous.
Now, in Britain, there's a well-established tradition that when a first-time MP has a brilliant debut, the Prime Minister, usually in public on the floor of the House, goes across and congratulates him or her. Did Mr. Modi have anything to say after your first speech?
No, actually, I've never spoken in the House while he's been there. Because he never stays long enough to go through I've never seen him there for a bill or anything like that. So he's always there for very short spurts of time. And I've never had the good fortune to speak while he's been in the House. But after the first time we spoke, I spoke in Parliament, there was a delegation, I think, that Trinamool had gone, we had gone and met the Prime Minister, and it was a 10 or 12 person delegation, and I was one of the people who were in the room with him, and he was going around the room getting introduced to everyone, and he knew, of course, the second and third timers. And then when he was speaking to Kalyan Banerjee, who was our chief whip, and Kalyan Das, very vociferous, and he tells Kalyan, he says, "Kalyan, what happened? I can't hear your voice nowadays because of your colleague who's who's obviously shouting so much." So he said it in good humor, so obviously he'd heard about it. But we don't have Prime Minister's questions, which is another tradition I wish that we adopted.
One of the things that everyone has noticed about not just the first, but all three major speeches, is the passion of your delivery and the very fiery, spirited way in which you do it. But what I noticed was actually the incredible research that goes into those speeches. There's a lot of detail, there's a lot of fact. Am I right in saying these are very well crafted and prepared speeches?
It's a mix of both. Yes, I do like to do research because that's my training. I'm a banker by training, and we are always, we are always very wary of showing up with a product which is just fluff and no substance. So I think that's something that is ingrained in me from my early days as an analyst, as a banker, that you never go in front of a client without knowing your stuff. So if you're a baby analyst and you're in front of a CEO of a company and he asks a question, you must at least have something to back up your presentation.
So you're not the sort of MP who readily stands up at the drop of a hat and makes a speech?
No, in fact, I get quite, if I'm speaking on a bill, then I definitely need time. If you tell me today to speak, it's happened sometimes, like my party will come to me and they say, can you speak this afternoon? And I get quite annoyed. And I say, no, I haven't done my homework. I can't speak this afternoon. So I definitely like to do my homework when I speak on a bill especially. But when you're speaking on something like the governor's address, which were the first two speeches, then it's obviously much more, you have much more leeway to speak from your heart and, your spirit and passion and a lot of other general things. But when you're speaking on a bill, it must go into the technicality of the bill. You must do a clause by clause dissection of the bill.
So you're
it's very important.
You veer in favor of substance rather than flights of oratory.
Yes, I think with time I'll probably get better at the oratory, but right now I'd rather have a very strong foundation and deliver that, as well as I do allow myself obviously to say what I'm really feeling, but I'd like that to be backed up with hard numbers also, because I think this is something that this government needs to be attacked on.
Now, of course, your speeches have made you perhaps one of the most recognized faces in your party, Trinamool. And yet, as you said yourself a moment ago, politics wasn't your first choice. You began life as a banker with JP Morgan in London and New York. What attracted you to banking?
Banking, it's quite strange. When we were, I think there are a lot of people who take and I see that among kids today, where they take very well thought out decisions and their parents are all sitting around a table and asking other people, what should our kids do? We didn't grow up like that. I mean, I got a scholarship, I went to Mount Holyoke, I graduated in math and econ, and everyone who did math and econ went into banking. We all had loans to pay back, and Wall Street came and hired us all. So basically it just happened. I mean, you couldn't be an econ and math major in a Seven Sisters school on the East Coast and not going to banking, because that's what everyone was doing.
So it was the loans that you had to pay back that determined that you had to go to a high income job like banking.
Definitely. And also our training, I think, in econ and math, banking was best suited for that. So it wasn't that it wasn't just a financial decision, but it was also that we were raring to start work. The idols that we looked up to being econ and math majors were bankers, we're alumni who had been bankers, and I certainly didn't have the luxury of taking a gap year and figuring out what I wanted to do,
But I noticed that in fact you were an investment banker for that 10 glorious years. They're often called the halcyon years of investment banking before the Lehman Brothers crash.
Yes.
What was it like to be a young banker in London and New York? And I imagine you were footloose and fancy free at the time.
Yes, it was wonderful actually, but we saw two crashes. We saw the tech crash. Remember when we joined in 2000, and when I went into banking just after I graduated in '98, we saw the tech crisis where we saw both the up and the down, where you had tech companies trading at multiples of thousands, and then suddenly you had companies which had the whole crash happen. So we saw that, and then we had some good years, and then of course in '98 when I graduated and went in August, just 2 months after was LTCM. We had the biggest bond crisis, where long-term capital management, if you remember, we had Russia defaulting on its debt. So in my banking career, which wasn't very long, 11 or 12 years, I did see 3 very big crises. One was Russia defaulting, the second was the tech crash, and the third, of course, was Lehman Bears.
I noticed that you stuck to the actual career and work part of the question. What about the après ski? Because bankers have a glorious life. They're rich, they're well paid, they go out, they give themselves incredible presents. Was that side of banking fun?
Yes, of course it was fun. I make no excuses for sort of, I like.
So you had a ball?
I had a great time. I wasn't a burnt out banker. People say, oh, did you get burnt out and come into politics? Not at all. I had a wonderful time as a banker. And, it was great when you're 22, you're 23, we bought our own flat in London, right in South Kensington, when I was 25 years old. And you buy your first car, which is incredible. We bought a car, we had a flat, we took lovely holidays. I could take my parents on holidays. We did everything that most people do when you're 35 or 40. So it's a wonderful feeling.
So banking ensured that Mahua, at the age of 23, was a rich kid.
was a very hard-working kid. Was a hard-working
but
and
a well-rewarded one as well.
Well-rewarded one, no doubt about that.
Then
no doubt
why
about
did you suddenly in 2008, 2009 chuck up this glorious job?
You know, I didn't think of I never thought that I would fail in politics. I always thought when I wanted to do it, that I would do it to make a difference.
Was it always an ambition you wanted to fulfill?
Yes, even as a child. Even as a child, I wanted to enter public life, and I wanted to do it in India. And I didn't quite know how or why, but I felt this. So, like I've said this before, I think even in your interviews, that when I turned 30, I said, okay, this is high time that I do it, because it's going to get late after this. So when I quit, it wasn't that I was quitting and I was going into this life of deprivation or this life of, I didn't think of it like that. I just thought that I've done banking and it's been wonderful, but now I need to do what I really need to do. And I feel like I have a nest egg, so I don't starve, and I can be an honest politician. That's the first thing. The second was I felt I had been well trained and I had been disciplined enough in my work ethic that I could go and do something else and stick it out.
But the interesting thing is there was always a politician or at least a political ambition lurking inside you.
Yes.
This was the moment to give it free rein.
Yes. It was, even when I was a child, I think after I was born, my mother took my kushti, we call it kushti, I don't know, the kundali or whatever you call it. And horoscope. And to somebody, and that gentleman told my mother that, she will be Indira Gandhi. So that stuck in my head. So when people ask me, what do you want to become? I always said I want to be the Indira Gandhi or Margaret Thatcher. So that was clearly my role model.
But Mahua always wanted to be a neta.
From what my mother tells me, even when I was 6 years old, I was bossing people around.
I have to tell you, looking at you, you are the most un-neta-like politician I have ever seen.
You should talk to people in my constituency that say I'm a terror. So,
But you mentioned Indira Gandhi, and I noticed that you began your political life with Congress.
Yes, I did.
I also noticed it was an association that only lasted for about a year.
Yes.
So was it a mistake to join Congress?
Not at all. It wasn't a mistake to join the Congress. I mean, from where we come from, everybody was with the Congress. Our families were Congress voters. We'd always been with the Congress.
Yours is a traditional Congress voting
yes, of course, Congress, all Congress voting family. But what happened in Bengal was that I wanted to do grassroots politics. I was very clear that I wanted to work at the village level. I wanted to do real grassroots. When Mamata Banerjee set up the Trinamool Congress, remember, she was Youth Congress president. So when she moved, she took all the youth cadre with her. So as a result of which, in Bengal, in North Bengal, the Congress was strong. But in South Bengal, by the time I entered in 2008-9, Mamata had really taken away all the cadre in South Bengal. So you would go into villages in Nadia or other places in the south, and there were not even 10 Congress workers in a village to give you a flag, because everybody had gone to the Trinamool. And that was one. And the second was that the Congress, at that time, the UPA government was in power, if you remember. UPA won. And in 2008, the left were allies of the Congress in UPA 1. So when we in the Congress were fighting the left on the ground, each time we did something, we'd get a call from Delhi saying, go easy, go easy. We're only in power because the left is supporting us. And there you had Mamata, who was on the streets fighting the left tooth and nail. And that's when I realized, if I have to do politics in West Bengal and we've got to fight the left, you couldn't do it on a Congress wicket. You just couldn't do it.
Was fighting the left important?
Yes, it was, because for me, I was always very clear that Bengal was my Karm Bhumi. It was definitely my Karm Bhumi. It was where I was going to start my political career.
And I take her a banker is anyway on the right-hand side of economics.
Yes, anyway, exactly. So that too. And we had just seen how we'd all become economic refugees in Bengal, growing up under the left. And we had seen this complete flight of human capital and everything else. You couldn't get jobs in Bengal. There was nothing there. So that was something that I felt an urgent need to reverse, or at least be part of that reversal.
But is there a question that, in fact, something about Mamata attracted you to Trinamool?
Yeah, in fact, the first time I met Mamata, I never met Mamata, being from a Congress family, and the general idea in sort of upper middle class educated Bengalis is that Mamata was a rabble rouser, that Mamata was a street fighter. And so I had never met her. But when the first time I met her, it was on a flight from Delhi to Calcutta, and I sat next to her. She was the most charming, wonderful, courageous spirit ever when I first met her. And I remember getting off the plane and thinking, wow, she's nothing like what I had thought she would be. And she has that one-to-one. It's impossible to walk away not being completely captivated by her.
Charming is not a word most people use for Mamata Banerjee.
I've had other people say this to me. I actually find her exceedingly charming because she's got that honesty of purpose, which I find very charming. And she just says it like it is. At least the first conversation I had with her.
So sitting on a plane as you talk to her,
yes,
she won you over and you joined Trinamool.
Yeah, pretty much, because I'd only been in India for about a year then. I was still in the Congress.
So if you hadn't met her on a plane, you might not have been a Trinamool member.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure I don't know where my life would have taken me, because I don't see how I would have remained with the Congress for very long. But at that point in time when I met her, it certainly sort of, hastened everything up. I can say that.
The one thing that everyone does notice is that both you and Mamta are very strong-willed, determined women. Do you get on with each other, or do you often clash as well?
No, I think people keep saying that, this is your party is an autocratic party. Every single person who sets up a party and works hard to do it, you must remember the odds Mamta has overcome. You must understand that. I mean, she's broken out of the Congress. She's probably the only one. I mean, Pranab Mukherjee got out, Sharad Pawar got out. She's probably the only one who's got out of the Congress and is today, at 35 seats out of Bengal. You must understand that she's a player today where she's holding a state, and we're a national party. We don't got
Jagan Mohan
recognition.
Reddy probably is the other one.
Yeah, Jagan's father, Jagan's probably the other one today, but I don't think he's quite reached the stature of Mamata Banerjee yet, but he's definitely done that. But he has done it he's also allied with the BJP now, but you must understand.
But it's a very interesting point you're making. Mamta actually broke with Congress and came to power on her own and repeated it again.
And she's repeated.
Sharad Pawar actually had to hold Congress's hand to get back into power.
And even Jagan, the YSR, is an NDA ally today. So, which we are not.
But he has an absolute majority on his own.
He does have an absolute majority on his own, yes. He does, I agree. But I think the other thing about Mamata Banerjee is that she can fight with her back to the wall. And she went, she had 9 seats, she went down to 1 and then went back to 19. It takes courage when you're sitting with only one MP. She's the only MP.
I get the feeling that when you have your back to the wall, you probably give your best as well.
Yeah, I do. That's my training, and I think that's her training.
Do you like being boxed into a corner? Do you like having to wriggle out of difficult positions?
Yeah, it brings out the best in me.
So the greater the challenge, the tougher the response.
Yeah.
So to use that dreadful cliche, when the going gets tough,
the tough get going.
Mahua gets going.
Yeah, I do.
Well, then tell me this. The lady sitting in front of me is so obviously avant-garde, strikingly dressed, extremely confident, and very cosmopolitan. How does rural Bengal react to you? Or do they see a different Mahua Moitra to the one I'm seeing?
Well, I obviously tried, because I'm being interviewed by you, Karan, that I've tried to sort of smarten up a little bit. No, but jokes aside, when I'm in Bengal, I think I'm the same person. So yes, I'm wearing a silk sari because I'm in Delhi today, and it's an air-conditioned studio, and I can. And so if I'm in...
As beautifully matched in rural Bengal?
Yes, I do think. I think where I come from, you must understand, is a textile hub. So Shantipur, Pulia, Nadia district has the most fabulous textiles in all of Bengal, and I would say probably the top 10 in India as well. So whatever I wear, I try. 95% of my saris are all woven by weavers in my district. I go directly there and buy them. And I think rural people, my constituents certainly like me to look nice. Sometimes when I go there, I wear a dull sari. I'll have women coming up to me and telling me that you're so young, why are you wearing this? Or why is your neck empty? Or, they look at you as a daughter. They think you're part of the family, and there's no reason they expect you to walk around looking disheveled or looking something. I mean, you're a leader. You have to show that you've got your stuff together, that you can't go there with looking unkempt and looking like you've barely had a wash.
So there's no difference between the urban Mahua we know and the rural Mahua that we don't get to see?
Not at all. In fact, when you see me campaigning, there's probably I'm wearing a lighter fabric or anything like that, but I don't think I try and look like how one should look, because I think my constituents are important, the work I do is important, and I need to get up in the morning and feel happy doing what I do. And part of how you look and how you come across is part of that.
Let's then at this point go a little backwards and talk about you. How would you describe the family you were born into and the sort of childhood you had?
I had an idyllic childhood. I was brought up in the tea estates in Assam. I had a very, I would say, very simple, rustic childhood. I mean, it was luxurious because I think plantation life is luxurious.
There's nothing rustic about you today.
No, but we grew up where the nearest town was Dhekia Juli. I mean, we were between Guwahati and Tezpur. Going to Guwahati once in 2 months was a big deal. Going to Tezpur club and having a meal was a good. Yes, my father was a tea planter.
Do they own their own estate?
My father's family does, but my father worked on a tea plantation. So we'd go into the Tezpur Club and having a meal in the Tezpur Club and having those Essex Farm sausages. And when I remember the Nandan Hotel opened in Guwahati, they had a restaurant there, and going there with my father and having a meal there with him and having a triple Sunday, as they called it, was a huge deal. And we'd come to Calcutta once a year. My parents went more frequently, but I'd come to Calcutta once a year during Christmas, and we got to buy our Christmas present at Paragon, and we'd go to Qualities on Park Street and have a meal. And we had a very simple childhood. It was a lovely childhood, an idyllic childhood.
You keep saying we. Do you have lots of brothers and sisters?
No, I have one. I have one sibling, an older sister. But she went to boarding school, so when I was growing up, I didn't spend a lot of time with her because she was already in Loreto, Shillong.
So your parents didn't send you to boarding school?
No, they didn't, because the funny thing was, my sister was a lot older than I. She was in Loreto, Shillong. Shillong at that point was having water crisis, and my sister, I think she got jaundice, and she wasn't doing very well in school and then after that, the Alpha agitation started. And in those days, there was no Assam Valley. There were no boarding schools in Assam. So people sent their kids to Dehradun or to Loreto, Shillong or Loreto, Darjeeling. But at that time, because of the Alpha agitation had already started, my parents were quite, it's incredible now that I think about it. I used to go to a little kindergarten called Bud's Garden, which was started by another lady, another neighboring tea estate. So we used to go there, and when I went there for 3 days, and when I would come back, it was 1 o'clock, and my mother said it interfered with her afternoon nap. So she stopped me going to the school. She said, I can do a better job. So she actually taught me at home. So I never went to kindergarten, I never went to school. I was just taught at home.
So as the only child at home, taught by your mum rather than sent to school, were you also pampered and spoiled?
No, I wasn't pampered and spoiled at all. My mother was just the strictest disciplinarian. I mean, all that spare the rod and spoil the child, believe me, my mother believed in this.
You had a lot of the rod.
We had a lot of the rod, and my father was very good that way. My father never raised a finger at us, and he'd always get
You were
angry.
daddy's darling, I bet.
No, I wasn't his darling. My father was quite fair with both the children, and with both of them. I don't think anyone was a darling. I think, in fact, growing up, I always
Watch
felt...
it, you're soon going to suggest you've had a deprived childhood.
Yeah.
Mummy with the rod and daddy very fair.
No. My parents were certainly not people. I mean, we didn't get any chocolates, we didn't get any sweets. You know, it wasn't like my mother would buy Bombay dyeing fabric and dresses would be made for my sister and I. It's not that we had a lot of books and things like that, but we certainly didn't have a lot of toys or a lot of clothes or... None of that. I remember my father once got us a video game. It was called Oil Panic. And we had that one video game between my sister and I for the longest time. So we had a lovely childhood, but it certainly wasn't one which was, sort of a luxurious, pampered child.
Now, you mentioned that you went to Mount Holyoke in Massachusetts, and that must have been a world away from a tea plantation in Darjeeling.
Yes, in Assam, yes.
Was it a huge surprise, America?
No, I had been to America with my parents when I was in 10th, 11th grade, I forget. So I had been.
So you were used to the ants?
I was used to it, and I actually went and saw a lot of colleges on the West Coast. I went on the West Coast to see some campuses, so I did that. But I finally got into the freezing East Coast rather than anything on the West Coast. But yes, Mount Holyoke was a bit of it was a bubble. It was a bubble, because I went to an all-girls school in Calcutta after we moved from Assam to Calcutta, and then I went to Mount Holyoke. Mount Holyoke was a bubble, but I had already come from a bubble because I'd already been in a women's school and a girls' school, and I'd been in Assam, which was a very, I would say, a closeted childhood. You know? So after that, coming to America was a bit of a... It was different, but it wasn't like had I gone to New York City or I'd gone to Columbia or I'd gone to a big... South Hadley was a little one-house town in the middle of nowhere. So it wasn't very different from going up on an estate, and it was a bubble. So while America was different, but the atmosphere and the cocoon wasn't very different, no.
Now, there are two things that I've been told about you. One, that you're perhaps one of the few rare MPs who's frequently brought cases to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Do you have a fascination for litigation?
I don't have a fascination for litigation, but I have a fascination for getting justice. And there seems to be no other way of getting justice than going to the Supreme Court or going to the court, right?
You've done it at least 3-4 times.
I've definitely done it, because, you know, when we are dealing with a government such as this, which try and do things, they break the law and they try and do things the back way, via the back door. There is no other reason why, there's no other recourse. And I've done this. I did this on Aadhaar, where they said this is mandatory to open a bank account. Why? It can't be. So I went and I got justice there, and they said that it isn't mandatory. When it came to the social media thing, where they said that they're going to snoop on all our social media accounts, I went to the Supreme Court and got a stay on that. So yes, I think it's very important.
And most recently you did it with PM Cares.
Yeah, I did with PM Cares, where he said I didn't have locus, so he said bring it up in Parliament, and so I did.
That was your third speech.
And I've also gone to court against the Citizenship Amendment Act, which is obviously sub judice now, but I've also filed, I'm one of the first petitioners against the CAA.
But you're probably very rare in that sense, because there are very few MPs who actually take issues which they feel so strongly about all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, but I think it's important that we do it, because I'm a citizen first and then an MP and an MP
this is
later.
you doing it, not the party.
Not at all, I do it. It's all in personal capacity.
Which means you actually pay for that as well.
Yes, of course.
So this is real passion and commitment that's coming out.
Yeah. I think it's important. I don't do it for everything, but something like the CAA, but of course we've got to do it, right? Something like social media snooping on all our accounts, this is something that we need to fight.
Now, if passion for justice is one of the qualities people don't know that you have, but you do, the other is, I gather you're a superb Italian cook.
I wonder who told you that, but I try.
You try, so you're not denying it. And I'm also told that your brownies are pretty close to mouth-watering.
Yes, I enjoy cooking. I actually enjoy cooking. And,
but is it self-taught?
I've taken a couple of lessons, yes. We used to go to Italy practically every summer when I lived in England, and where we would go and stay was this agriturismo in Italy, in Chianti, in a small little place near Poggibonsi, which was between Florence and Siena. And the agriturismo was run by this couple called Massimo and Patricia. And Massimo was a fabulous cook. So, you know, as it is in Tuscany, where you're staying in the agriturismo, everyone gets together in the evening, and he sits and he teaches you how to cook. So I've done a couple of those, and I'm very interested in cooking. So I'll try and speak to people and pick it up. And baking is not something that I'm very good at. My mother and sister are much better than I am. But there are 3 or 4 things that I do, and brownies is one of them.
But how easy or how difficult is it to carry on Italian cooking, A, in India, where perhaps the ingredients are not the best or even available, and B, when you have a full-time job as an MP as well?
I don't do it very often. I don't do it as often as I need to. The ingredients, you'll be surprised. There's certain things like tomatoes and things that are not the same as in Italy, but otherwise you pretty much get everything in India. Like pretty much everything you do get in India. And when I do go abroad, I bring back some of the things. But you do get, I think, as far as ingredients are concerned, I'm not complaining. But I don't get the time on a daily thing. But if I'm in Delhi for Parliament or something, or in the evenings, I love to have a cookout for friends.
Cooking is relaxing.
Yeah, I find it very relaxing, very relaxing. I love to have a little sit-down dinners for 6 or 8 people. I love it.
If you're a cook, why doesn't it show? I can't see it on you.
No, I cook for others, see.
You don't like your own food?
I don't like my own food very much.
You know, there's something about you that everyone talks about. One is your fiery speeches, which have captivated the country, and the other is your striking couture. I have rarely seen a woman MP who is so very well dressed. So tell me something. Do you take great meticulous care over what you wear? Does it matter to you?
It matters to her, but I'm not obsessed with clothes, to be fair. I know this is a question I get all the time, and sometimes it annoys me, and I'm like, can you stop obsessing about... It seems almost silly that I get asked about my clothes when there's so many people in this country, so many people in this country, especially the area that I represent, that most people have 3 or 4 sets of clothes to wear. So it seems rather frivolous that we spend so much time discussing this. But if I'm faced with this question, I like to answer it, so I'm answering it. And yes, I care about what I wear, in that I think when I'm wearing saris, I feel good in them. And I also wear saris because I think it showcases the weavers of my district. And if Indians wear saris, it is a cycle. The more saris that women in India wear, the more the weavers have a market. And if people like us, if I wear a sari and somebody asks me, Mahua, where did you get that from? And I say, I got that from Biren Boshak in Pulia. They say, okay, can you give me the number? And if 3 more weavers do that and they get work, I think that's a cycle that we all do.
But you tend to wear Bengali saris.
I tend to wear, I think more than 90% of my saris are Bengal.
There's something very interesting was said by you in a recent interview to Verve magazine. I'm going to quote it. You said, I need to wear my clothes rather than the other way around. Nothing should be overwhelming.
Yes.
Does that mean you like to look attractive, but you don't want to attract attention?
Absolutely. And I think that, I see a lot of designers, and even when I was not a politician, I would see a lot of designers which over embellished. And I'm a small person, and I'm a petite person, and if I were to ever wear something with a lot of bling or a lot of over embellishment, I think all people would be like, okay, what is she wearing? And that's not it. You have to wear. You're wearing
Plus, you
something.
would disappear behind the
You would
clothes.
disappear behind the clothes, and I think you're wearing something that your personality has to shine through, and you have to come across. You're wearing the clothes, and I think that's what I meant.
In other words, you should always be more important than the clothes you're wearing.
Always, for everything.
You should attract attention. The clothes should be just an
It's what you do.
accompaniment.
It's what you do that should shine. It's who you are that should shine, definitely.
Something else you said to Verve magazine caught my attention. You
Good
said
Lord, this must
you
have been some
wear-
old interview.
You said you wear saris for work, but in the evening you prefer dresses. What does the BJP's Hindutva Brigade make when you appear in one of your dresses?
You know what? I'm not asking. I'm not asking, and I don't really care. So, there you go.
Now, you're a politician. Undoubtedly, I imagine one day you will be a minister. Does politics fulfill you? Because you're at that age, and I won't give your age away, when you could actually go on to a third career if you want. Is there something else beyond politics you'd like to do?
No, I think this is it. This is it. There have been times where I've been down and out in my political career in the past 9 or 10 years, where so many of my friends and well-wishers have said, Mahua, why are you doing this? Just go back, just get a job, get back, get your life back together. And even in those tough times, I have never felt the slightest inclination towards going back and getting another
So this
job.
is
or
a
doing
commitment
this is
for
it.
keeps.
This is it. I don't know where. Politics is very strange. You can never predict. You're telling me you'll be a minister. You can't predict that, Karan. You can have people who are doing everything right, and you can never predict what it'll be tomorrow. So all you can do is, I think, walk the straight and narrow path and stay true to yourself and do what you're doing. And whatever happens will happen. I believe that at any rate, but I'm not giving this up. This is it. This is the passion I feel. I'm not giving this up.
Do I get a hint in that answer that you believe in luck, perhaps fate? Whatever will happen, will happen?
Yeah, there's a great element of that, certainly in my life, because if you see my life 15 years ago, where I was and where I am today, I mean, luck and fate and destiny certainly have a very large part to play. Certainly. And whenever things have happened to me, or not happened to me, in fact, when I think back now, and I think, oh, why didn't I, in 2011, I could have stood from Jalangi, I could have done this, I could have done that. There's a reason why everything happens. There's a reason why everything happens. There's a reason why I was an MLA first. The reason why I didn't stand on a Congress ticket in 2009. There's a reason I became an MP when I became an MP.
And that reason is fate, destiny, God, or call it what you want.
Absolutely. I mean, I always say, whatever's written here, you can't take away.
Are you religious?
Yes, I am. I'm not overtly religious, but I am. I have a very deep faith in sort of a divine power. I do. And sometimes when I do wrong things, I'm always scared of what will happen to me. So I think that keeps one on track.
I'm tempted to ask, what are wrong things?
Another interview for that one.
Mahua Moitra, a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Karan. Thank you
Good
so
luck.
much.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you.